online gambling in the US is the new Wild West. Companies are buying off politicians, and influencers are making millions to turn you into addicts.
All right, boys, who we betting on?
And look, I'm no saint, because I did one a few months ago. You can compete for $1 million. All you have to do is download and play my... So I haven't taken one since, but if there's one thing that I've learned is that most of you have no idea where this is headed.
The mass legalization and normalization of sports gambling has the potential to rival the opioid epidemic.
None of what these videos are saying is wrong, but they're missing one key element. The gambling industry used to fear regulation, but now it may have found a way out by making everyone except the gamblers rich. And in the process, they're starting to build political influence to guarantee a future where the Wild West will never end.
Gambling addiction is not a failure of will.
I'm definitely appealing to a male audience.
And boom! Not bad.
You won't break even. You won't win.
The average debt of a gambling addict can range from $15,000 to $90,000.
It is a brain disorder which is preyed upon by the gambling industry.
You see, as gambling addicts, we live in the shadows, and we're able to hide in our darkness.
So I think to understand this Wild West of gambling, we need to start phase 1 with ads, and more specifically, the lack of regulation around it. Because out of the 6,000 of you that I've asked, most of us are seeing these ads everywhere. And the best way to make sense of it all is to compare it to how other vices used to be marketed in the US, like tobacco and alcohol. Back in the day, cigarette companies could literally put ads anywhere. Marlboro Man was as recognizable to kids as Mickey Mouse. And it was the same for alcohol with Spuds MacKenzie.
Do you know why Spuds MacKenzie has so much fun at parties?
But then, something changed. Today, alcohol ads can't show cartoon characters or celebrities that appeal to kids. And for tobacco ads, it's even more strict. No TV, no radio, no billboards, and no celebrity endorsements. See, there's a reason why you never see tobacco ads anymore, as only print and in-store promos are allowed. But these regulations were on purpose, because look at this graph here. Smoking rates have plummeted, and less people are drinking every single year. And I think a lot of the thought process is like, if this big celebrity endorses it, then look, they must use it, they must trust it, or else why would they be doing this? And unlike smoking and alcohol, gambling is exploding. And as I'll get into, so are the calls for addiction helplines, up 45% from last year. So if these aren't targeting minors, then what's the problem, right? Well, that's something I wanted to look closely into myself, because is that truly the case? So to find out, I went to a pro soccer game in Austin, Texas to see how many gambling ads I'd see. Because in Texas, most forms of gambling is still illegal, including sports betting. First thing I noticed was a giant ad from a company called SciPlay, and it was clear that they were one of Austin FC's biggest sponsors. They even have a bar named after them inside the stadium. But here's the weird part. Again, sports betting is illegal, so why the hell are they paying for all this money to have their logos everywhere? Turns out, SciPlay isn't technically a gambling company. What they do is make free-to-play mobile games that are like online casinos. But instead of betting real money, you buy digital tokens with real money to play.
Ready to party?
So it looks and plays exactly like gambling, but without the payout, since you can't exchange the digital tokens for real money. Here's where it gets interesting. Before SciPlay, the previous sponsor was a real sports betting company, PointsBet, and their sponsorship deal was a clear bet for the future. 10-year exclusive rights to run sports betting if it ever becomes legal in Texas. So it still remains to be seen if it will, but a couple things are clear. One, gambling companies are throwing money, and two, ad rules are loose in the US. There's obviously content restrictions, like you can't lie or target kids. But when it comes to placement, such as logos on jerseys or stadiums, all good. So gambling companies are even advertising in states like Texas where gambling is still illegal. The question becomes, what is still yet to come from this Wild West?
Fuck.
So obviously this is just for research purposes, but to understand it myself, I also had to break the law and partake.
$25 if Timbers win, 25 if Austin wins.
And I'll win. I'm gonna win.
No way.
Shake his hand.
But in all seriousness, I think the best way to see where this could all go is to look across the pond. And it's exactly why I spoke with Matt Zarb-Cousin, a leading gambling reform leader in the UK who's seen this all before.
Understand what the nature of these companies really is.
This man took advantage of the UK's public information laws to access the data that Flutter kept on one gambler there, and he was startled by how much it revealed.
There's lots of opportunities to gamble in Britain. You assume it's safe. You don't realise how easy it is to get addicted to that stuff.
I think once you hear his story, you'll better understand why he's fighting.
I started gambling when I was 16. Once I'd become addicted to it, that was the only thing I wanted to do. And I ultimately ended up in a position where I had lost about £20,000. I was in a huge amount of debt at the age of 20, and it wasn't so much the money, but it was the feeling of loss of agency. I wanted to take my own life. Just after I turned 20, I quit gambling for good, and then I started campaigning against the machines. And in parallel to that, I set up Gamban, which is a software you can download on your devices, which blocks gambling websites and apps.
How does what's happening in America now mirror what the UK maybe experienced 10 to 15 years ago?
Yeah, it's extremely similar. So lots of the commercial practices of the sector have now, been regulated out of existence to some extent in Britain, but they're all being readopted in the US. And some of the worst things, I think, are the way that they profile their customers to try to drive engagement. And it runs contrary to this idea of responsible gambling.
So if gambling companies are running the same playbook here, you think that regulators would at least be learning from the past, right? Well, learning is taking place, but not from the right people. Gambling companies aren't waiting around to be regulated like tobacco and alcohol. They're instead racing to get as many people hooked as possible to keep the Wild West going. And here's the terrifying part. They may have figured out the formula. And it could be 10 times as more effective than what gambling companies pulled off in the UK. Because now they figured out how to tap into something hidden deep inside all of our brains without us ever realizing that it's happening.
The scarcity loop, as it is often applied today, it provides the ultimate fun, distracting escape. So this place is basically a living, breathing casino, but it's used entirely for research on human behavior.
So that's Michael Easter, an investigative journalist. And in his search to understand why casinos are so addictive, he found something shocking. A fully functioning private casino built for one purpose only, to study human behavior. And guess who's funding it?
73 different companies. So there's gambling companies that are involved, but also a bunch of big tech companies who are on the Fortune 500.
And what these companies have mastered is a behavior loop called the scarcity loop, a cycle that's almost impossible to escape once you're trapped within it. And it has 3 parts. The first is opportunity, a chance to win something valuable. And in online gambling, that's simple, the chance to win money. Duh. But the next part, that's where things get interesting.
You know you're going to get the thing of value if you continue the behavior, but you don't know when, and you don't know how valuable it's going to be.
So whether the reward is generational money, a few bucks, or in most cases, nothing at all, the unpredictability floods your brain with even more dopamine than if you were winning consistently. That's why if you've ever seen these apps, they're filled with flashy animations and fake out moments like you almost won. It's all on purpose. But here's the scary part. Gambling companies have mastered the perfect timing to pull those trying to quit right back in. They send push offers like bet $100 now, get a $100 free bet to draw users with a sense of urgency and FOMO. But then when you inevitably lose, you're back on the hamster wheel of chasing that next win. And this vicious cycle is only completed by this third and final part, the step that makes sure that this cycle never ends. Because the faster and easier it is to place another bet, the more money gambling companies make. That's why they intentionally removed all friction to spend from one-tap betting, instant deposits, and autoplay features. While on the opposite end, increasing the friction to view how much you've lost or making it extremely difficult to close your account fully. And with this quick repeatability, the scarcity loop is able to continue over and over again. But here's the thing, this 3-part formula isn't just used for gambling now. Remember, there were other companies that were funding the research casino too. Social media, video games, shopping, dating apps, and even rideshare apps. If you drive for Uber, you're given a chance to win different amounts each time depending on the ride. And then you're driving and then you see a notification for surge pricing in high demand areas. That's an unpredictable reward. And then once you finish and you drop them off, a new notification comes up again the second you finish the last one. That's quick repeatability. And that's exactly how the scarcity loop has become the perfect playbook for growth for these gambling companies. It turns any habit, driving, scrolling, gambling into something mindless. And before you even realize it, you've been playing slots for hours. So with this powerful tool, gambling companies are now looking to make as much money as possible as fast as they can, because you need money to influence regulation decisions. How are they gonna do that? It all starts with targeting the right audience. Just like how your YouTube algorithm brought you this video. Only this time, it's actually working in your favor because you're watching content that helps you get smarter about money and power. It's also exactly why I used my sponsor, Opus Clip, to create my shorts and clips on my second channel. Their AI-powered Clip Anything feature allows me to just copy and paste my video URL, and it creates the most viral clips for me. And with their Reframe Anything feature, it adjusts framing and movement and resizes the video to fit any social platform with just one click. In fact, there's a good chance that's maybe how you even know me, because these shorts from this video went pretty viral. So now I can focus my time making the best videos on long form instead of spending hours on making clips that are very important for reach. So use my link in the description to get 50% off for 3 months with Opus Clip. So back to the video, because who are the gambling companies targeting to make the most money possible as quick as possible and to escape regulation?
You will lose everything. You're gonna lose it. It doesn't matter. You understand? Casinos are profitable for a reason.
There are 3 main groups, and they all share one disturbing thing in common. The first group is the very people that they claim to want to help, when in reality, they're building up the perfect target. There's no better person than Matt to ask about this, because these gambling operators, they claim that they use AI and algorithms to detect problem gambling and limit the harm to help people gamble responsibly. But I think that's a big conflict of interest. Are they using them to actually help them or to exploit them in more cases than not?
I think what we've seen is even if the technology does exist to reduce harm, it's not being used for that reason. In the UK, we have data laws where you can submit something called a subject access request, and that gives you the right to have access to all the data that a gambling company holds on you, including the third parties. Now, it's extremely difficult to do this. It was a real fight that took several months.
I'm guessing that they try to block it in every legal way, I'm guessing, right?
Initially, they just give us transactional data, they didn't give us the profiling data, they didn't give us the third parties had. And it's the third parties where it gets really interesting. So you've got these companies that essentially, like data warehouses that work for the gambling industry, that process the data and then produce marketing profiles based on different characteristics, behavioral characteristics. So what we did was we looked at that and we commissioned a report called Cracked Labs, which was carried out by a data scientist called Wolfie Crystal, who basically looked at what was happening when you logged onto the site, when you were actually visiting the webpage, and sort of matching all of those things up.
On this particular one, he played slots for 3 to 4 days straight. They knew the life stage, the customer life stage he was at, so win back, they described it. So people that have given up gambling for a while and they're trying to get them to come back. There's also like 2,514 deposits in a year, which is about 7 a day.
And as a result of that, we could very easily surmise that they were profiling this individual, they knew he was addicted, and they were still trying to market to him to get him to gamble more. So what we said to the data regulator in the UK was, here's the inputs, here's the outputs. What we need you to do is have a look at whether they are purposely targeting people they know to be addicted. If that's a policy within the company, if that's anything in their processes that tells you that for sure, because that's basically what it looks like.
Is that what's happening even more so in the US right now?
Probably worse because of the looser data regulations in the US compared to here. I think the VIP schemes are another thing that's been replicated in the US.
Which brings us to the second group, because within these pool of addicts, gambling companies especially target big spenders they refer to as VIP or whales. And they're valuable because not only are they the most likely to be addicted, they are the top 5% of customers, giving 86% of the profit. But what surprised me is talking to Matt that most of these whales are not who you might picture them to be.
There was a guy in the UK called Tony Parente, who was a VIP with Paddy Power, which is another Flutter company. And he was given a VIP manager and was taken to any sporting event he wanted, given executive boxes, given flights to places, and he was losing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds. And the VIP manager was getting, I think, 25% of his losses. But he wasn't aware of that till that case went to court. But whereas in Vegas, they would have found the whales and they would have cultivated those relationships with people that could afford the losses, the online gambling sector has no regard for that. And the interesting thing is, when regulations came in Britain, off the back of the Tony Parente case, to deal with VIP schemes, they basically said, if you want to add someone to one of these programs, you've got to do an affordability check. And when these regulations came in a year later, the number of VIPs dropped by 90%.
Well, so hold on. So that's a very important point. So most of these whales, like, I immediately thought about someone rich. You're telling me that 90% of them were people that just couldn't afford whatever they were gambling.
Yeah, exactly. So lots of people who are made VIPs will be not being able to afford the losses.
And the same thing is already happening in the US. A recent lawsuit alleges FanDuel targeted a known gambling addict, offering him free credits and gifts to keep him betting even after he lost everything. So these gambling companies have this data and they know who they are, and it's exactly why they want this Wild West to continue. Sure, if a whale can afford to lose millions, that's one thing. But when whales are potentially taking their kids' college funds or mortgage payments without any restrictions, something has to change. And what's most disturbing is that among whales and addicts, one thing stood out. Why are young men like yourself a couple of years ago the most susceptible to getting addicted to gambling? Is this all by design?
So young men obviously are more likely to be betting on sports and more likely to be watching sports and therefore, wagering on it. And there's a kind of competitive element to it. Men, this is broadly speaking, tend to prefer the higher adrenaline sort of games. So roulette, where there's a lot of money going on a particular spin, and then that event has to take place. Similarly to blackjack. For women, it tends to be games like bingo, certainly in a UK context, and then slot games.
So when it comes to online gambling, the target is clear. Within the addicts are the whales, and within the whales are mostly young men. And that's not a coincidence, it's by design. Internal documents from FanDuel, a sports gambling app, openly revealed their target market: young male sports fans with a high preponderance to gambling. And it's clearly working. Today, nearly half of US men aged 18 to 49 have online sports betting accounts, and that's without it being legal in huge states like California, Florida, and Texas. So I think it's clear that the business model isn't built on responsible gambling. It's built on getting more and more people addicted. And I think something to mention is that now a lot of these companies are publicly traded. And so their main goal becomes profit for the shareholders. And if helping addicts mean making less money, of course investors will be the first to stop that. And if regulations start being proposed that could also stop that growth, you have to assume they'll also fight like hell to stop that from passing as well. So phase one was simple: make money and build up the funds so you can fight regulation. But more money also brings more attention, especially from regulators.
There's all of this maths going on that analyzes your betting and ensures the company wins. It will always win.
Which brings us to phase two, where the focus is now shifted to building political power. And they're doing it by creating dependence, a system where everyone except the gambler wins. It's not like they invented this. This is a playbook that's been used by powerful industries before, building an incentive web so big and profitable that regulating it becomes nearly impossible. And one of the clearest examples of this influence web is how online betting has infiltrated sports. They pulled it off in three key ways. First, through massive sponsorships. Both the NBA and NFL has signed nearly $1 billion plus deals with gambling companies to become their official league partners. It's not just the leagues, individual teams are cashing in too. Almost every franchise in the NFL, NBA, and MLS has some sort of gambling deal, jersey patches, and even entire stadium names. Now this might not sound like a big deal, but there's a reason the UK just banned gambling logos on jerseys starting in 2026, including my favorite team, Arsenal. Because when the average child can recognize over 200 brand logos by the age of 6, they won't just be recognizing gambling logos, they'll be wearing one. But beyond tangible money, here's why sports leagues really love gambling. Put simply, it makes people care more. If you got money riding on a game, even on a random Tuesday night matchup in a cold, rainy day in Stoke, it matters. Suddenly, money's on the line. And if I'm gonna be real, when I bet against my friend at the game, look, I love soccer, but I was paying attention to a lot more. And the biggest proof of that is that the match ended 0-0, but it's probably one of the best games that I've ever been to. But again, guys, this was just for research. But anyways, as you can see, this can elevate the fan experience, which leads to higher ratings and higher ad revenue. But with sports betting, it's also creating an entirely new media opportunities and even careers. Games are now absolutely covered with betting segments, live odds, and dedicated shows all about gambling. And as we talked about, gambling companies are also now starting to throw serious money at influencers to tap into the trust that they built with their audience, whether it's Nelk, Sketch, or even creators like me. Sure, the goal is to get more users, but as someone who's done it, I personally think there's something even deeper. And I think the goal is to normalize gambling, even if you're a person that might never ever place a bet, the more you see something, the more you might start supporting it or being at least indifferent to it. And that's exactly why I decided to sit down with Taylor Mathis, one of the biggest gambling influencers today, because her story can also show how easy it is to get pulled into that industry.
I was approached by a company when sports betting was becoming legalized within the United States, and they were looking for a female to really come on camera and kind of give digital picks across their social media platforms. I knew nothing about sports betting, and my career took off a lot more in the sports betting space than it ever did before in the traditional sports media side.
You're known in the space for like your walking bets.
Yeah.
And I also saw like recently on your YouTube, you started like a series where you make a sandwich and then you talk about kind of like analysis and like your bets.
Yeah.
Who exactly is your audience? What age and gender are you targeting? And why?
Well, I guess I would say if I had the choice, my audience choice I would want to be trying to appeal to would be like a mix of men and women. But like I said at the start of this interview, women aren't betting on sports as much. So I'm definitely appealing to a male audience 100%. The walking bets started in a way, I literally was walking one time outside and I was talking baseball, not even giving out bets. I was just like talking about the upcoming season. And people started suggesting you should do this and you should give out bets. And it ended up going very viral on the internet. And my tailor-made sandwiches idea kind of came from a similar type of thing of how men like to say that women belong in the kitchen making a sandwich. Is how I came off of that, because I'll get that a lot in my comments. So if you guys are gonna say this, let me play off of all of that.
If I may challenge you, do you ever feel like you're sexualizing yourself or playing up to stereotypes in order to monetize this attention?
That's a great question. Because I've thought about that a lot over my time of how my career has kind of like transformed. When I originally started and I was doing traditional sports television, you know, I was in a very traditional role, very buttoned up, giving the sports analysis for the night or highlights or whatever it may be, and trying to grow myself in that traditional branded way. I always struggled with that because one, I felt like a lot of my personality was like very stifled in a type of role like that. I'm just walking, I'm just talking, it is what it is. Men, I feel like, have always sexualized me in this space. So in a way for me with doing like the walking bets or the tailor-made sandwiches, all of that kind of stuff, I don't want to say I've quote unquote sexualized myself or fed into it. But again, to me, it just feels like something that has naturally already happened over time. And at least with this, I feel like I get to be more of myself. At the end of the day, I sleep well and I feel good about what I'm doing. I think I'm entertaining, I'm fun, and I'm not too worried about it.
So whether you agree with her or not, one thing is clear. Gambling is making a lot of people happy. Influencers, media companies, sports leagues, and they're all cashing in except the gamblers, of course. But again, the strategy isn't new. In fact, big tech ran the exact same playbook. They monetized our attention and data. They built an ecosystem so powerful, it's embedded in every area of our daily lives. And soon enough, they became untouchable, embedding themselves into media, advertising, and especially governments. And now, big gambling is on the same path, working to become so economically and politically valuable, they're also gonna become impossible to regulate meaningfully. Because now they're starting to get close to the very politicians and governments who would stop them to make sure that they don't.
If you're going to do something effective, it's going to compromise your revenue. So we don't do much in the way of effective programs.
But wait, hold on. Does gambling even have the potential to become valuable enough like big tech did? Since 2018, 38 states have legalized online sports betting, but in 2023, it only brought in like $2.5 billion in total tax revenue, which is pretty much nothing compared to the overall budget. So yes, big states like California, Texas, and Florida are still yet to legalize, but it's clear US governments aren't dependent on gambling money. But here's the thing, the story you can create sometimes matters a lot more than the actual numbers. Like, take Georgia, for example. Since 1993, their lottery has raised $15 billion for education, helping hundreds of thousands of disadvantaged students go to college. And it's proof that when done right, something seen as a societal ill can be turned into real positive change. But that kind of success story is exactly what gambling companies now weaponize to push to get what they want. In Georgia, support for gambling only came after a clear promise that the money would fund education. So the campaign leaned hard into that message to win public approval. And now gambling companies are playing similar games to win over policymakers. How much political influence do these gambling companies have now, like as we're seeing it in the US and the lack of regulation around it?
There's a lot of revolving doors between the gambling lobby and members of parliament, between the regulator and the gambling lobby or the gambling industry. So we're working in an environment where the gambling industry is very, very legitimised within the context of their decision-making structures. And I think that they've successfully co-opted, Kalshi has successfully co-opted Trump Jr. to their process of legitimising their platform and what they're offering on a federal level. The current government, the particular people in charge of making the decisions related to gambling, are very close to individuals that run the gambling lobby.
And once they're close enough to the politicians, they can start whispering the same message that they sold to the public. And when tax revenue gets framed as free money, it's a much easier sell, especially compared to raising taxes or cutting services. Because for politicians, the goal is simple: stay in power. So even if there are legitimate societal costs like family breakdown, crime, and bankruptcy that rises by 25 to 30% in states that have legalized gambling, those consequences can all be ignored as long as the optics look good. And so remember, it's all about the optics. And I think gambling companies understand that in order to keep governments happy, you just have to keep the public happy. Because as soon as public opinion turns and shifts, regulation starts becoming inevitable, just like it did for tobacco and alcohol. But for now, gambling companies are staying one step ahead, to the point where they're successfully pushing for even more expansion. The Wild West isn't ending. It's just getting wilder.
We're not here today because we want to stop the gambling industry. We're here today because government has failed to pay attention to gambling-related harms.
So the most important question becomes, where is gambling actually headed? According to Matt, we haven't even seen the worst of it yet in the US.
And the really dangerous thing, the warning I think that the US can learn from the UK, is the casino product is extremely harmful. So for online slots, about 45% of people that access that product are considered problem or at-risk gamblers. So I think the real risk is, even though I think 35 states have now legalized sports betting, only 7 have legalized iGaming, the casino product. And the end game for the industry in America is to get every state to legalize online casino. And that's where they know they're going to make the profits, is to acquire the customers now, give them lots of offers and incentives and get them kind of engaging with this on a habitual basis, and then cross-promote to the people that they know.
Interesting. So this sports betting isn't even really a problem in the grand scheme of things compared to how much profit and money that can be exploited through these online casino games.
Exactly right. Yeah. So you ain't seen nothing yet, unfortunately.
And this reality is coming sooner than you think, because the influencers are starting to jump on it.
I just took on a new venture as of yesterday too. I'm really starting to branch off into the casino space as well.
And I feel like that's actually the big gold rush next, right?
I host a show called Slot Wars, where essentially people literally play slots against each other, and people watch this online. And it's kind of crazy to me that people are so interested, or on a day-to-day basis want to see people doing that and or play that themselves. But I think it says a lot about where society's at with instant gratification and how short our attention spans are, just because it's so instantly gratifying with casino content to see that you have a win right away, as we're even with sports betting. Yeah, it takes a couple hours, but for some people that's like too much time.
So big tech, big tobacco, and big gambling in the US are any indication, even when change comes, it's often too late. Right now, the Safe Bet Act is being proposed with bipartisan support. It aims to restrict gambling ads by limiting celebrity and influencer marketing, but if I had to bet, the gambling industry is already lobbying hard against it. That said, after doing a gambling ad myself and after this investigation, I believe that gambling should be legal. Because whether it's legal or not, it will always exist. And people should have the freedom to make their own individual choices, even if there's risk involved. Fact is, just like when I bet against my friend to smoking to drinking, it can be done in a fun, safe, and responsible way. And in my opinion, the responsible thing in society isn't to eliminate harm completely, because one, that's impossible, but the better question is, more so, how can we reduce it? So if there's one conclusion I came to, is that we should permit it, but we shouldn't promote it. What I will promote is something that I think can actually benefit you watching. Because just like this video, I'm confident that it can help you become smarter about money and power. Check out my newsletter, The Money Trails, where we uncover the money behind today's issues in business, society, and culture. Or watch this video on how politicians keep getting so damn rich.